Christ is among us.
Yes, now is coming.
Morning, everybody. God bless. Please have a seat. Welcome. Thank you for coming. It's a great joy for us to be celebrating this year on Sunday, the Feast of St. Nicholas. On a Sunday, it only happens every few years that we can celebrate it on a Sunday. And 2020 gave us a little break this year by giving us some of our favorite saints on the Sundays in December. Next week is St. Herman of Alaska. The week after that, St. Ignatius of Antioch. Some real wonderful saints to ponder on this Christmas season. But leading it off, we have St. Nicholas, and we're blessed today with a beautiful icon of St. Nicholas that includes a relic. That little medallion there in the bottom corner, encased in some wax base, is a portion of the bone of St. Nicholas, a holy relic, Sfinte Moaște, as we say it in Romanian. And this presence, I said last night, we should greet this relic when it comes as if we're greeting a visiting bishop. And so we gathered at the door and welcomed him as we would a visiting bishop, because that's how it felt. And I very much feel the presence of St. Nicholas today in our midst. The tropar, the hymn of St. Nicholas that we sing, says that you were revealed to your flock as a rule of faith, an image of humility, a teacher of abstinence. Let's talk about how St. Nicholas is a rule of faith. What does that mean, rule of faith? Basically, another way of putting it is he's the measuring stick. He's the ruler of faith. He's the one who sets the standard of what a faithful Christian could and should be. It's an incredible image of faith in his life. And because of that faith, he was called upon to become a leader, an overseer, episkopos, in the church, one who has to have the power of good judgment over how things are done in the church. That's the biggest job of our bishops. They have that role to manage the household of God here on earth. And they have to make difficult decisions. And they have to be leaders. And when they fail in their leadership, the whole church suffers. So St. Nicholas lived at a very difficult time to be a bishop. He was not a bishop in a nice rosy time where the church, it was legal to be Christian, and everything was going well, and they had all the power and all the money. No, he was in the time at the end of the Roman persecutions. He lived through the persecution of Diocletian, which was one of the worst of the persecutions of the Romans. And not long after that, as soon as the church was made legal by Constantine, he quickly got embroiled in the controversy about Arianism. And he had to struggle to stand firm and preach orthodoxy in the face of Arianism. So he didn't have an easy life. Didn't have an easy time to be a bishop. But he shows us, as the rule of faith, what does it look like to be a good leader in those situations? So I'd just like to offer kind of three things we can look at then as to how he exemplified Christian leadership in a time of difficulty. The first is, he was an extraordinary man of prayer. Prayer was the foundation of everything that he did. His prayer was incredible. The Holy Apostle James, brother of the Lord, says the prayer of a righteous man avails much. It's very effective. And St. Nicholas's prayers were incredible. He's known as the wonder worker because of the power of his prayer. That God heard his prayers, the fervency of his prayers in his righteousness, and responded. There are many stories about how he would come upon a pagan temple in his area. And remember, this is not at a time when paganism was by any means being persecuted. And he would stop outside the pagan temple and he would pray. He would just pray. And the demons of the temple would be driven away, and in some cases, the very stones of the temple would crumble into dust. That's the kind of prayer that he had. And I've heard stories of similar things happening even in the world today, with people coming into countries where there's no Christianity. They pray, and the very stones of the building shudder and crack at the name of Jesus Christ. So it's not something that's just a legend from old times. It happens still. that prayer and that fight against idolatry, both internally, against the passions, and externally, in the culture around him, made him a force to be reckoned with. And obviously it's an image of strength. If we don't have that foundation of prayer, it's going to be very hard to build anything on top of that. So as Christians, that has to be our primary goal first. If we're going to be of any use to anybody else, let us develop a spirit and a habit of prayer in our lives. The second thing, we hear that he was a teacher of abstinence. And you normally think of abstinence, okay, so he didn't drink, he was a monk, he was ascetic. That's true. But he took it very deeply. He lived a life of abstinence in the sense that he withheld from trying to indulge himself in all the pleasures of this world. And he understood that what he received in this life was the blessings of God, and that he was merely the steward of those things. I was reminded yesterday by my daughter when I said, are you eating my something or something like that? And she said, I'm just the steward of the goods. She heard the story last night of St. Nicholas, and I was put to shame. St. Nicholas understood this better than I did, that he was just the steward. He was just a caretaker of the blessings that was given to him. And so he became an image of poverty and an image of charity to those around him. The most famous story about St. Nicholas that we all know here in America, even if we don't know it, it's influenced our culture, is the story of the stockings, right? The reason we put up stockings by the fireplace has everything to do with the actual St. Nicholas. Because in his day, he did not live in a time in which it was easy to be poor. And it's not easy to be poor at any time in history, but let's put it this way, to be poor in America today is still wealthy compared to being poor in the 3rd or 4th century, okay? The fact that you can still generally live and get welfare and all these things, the social network that we have, the safety net and so forth, is imperfect as it is so much better than it was in the Roman era, right? Where your choices were basically, if you were poor, you could sell yourself into slavery, basically. That was your best solution. And so St. Nicholas had a family that was so poor, I mean, we're talking Les Miserables level poor, where the man had 3 daughters. And back in that day, if you had daughters and you wanted your daughters to get married, they had to bring something to the table, a dowry. They had to have some kind of collection of wealth to make them enticing to be married. Otherwise, it was considered to be complete charity to take this person. Forget love in the ancient world. That was a much later idea, right? This idea that you marry for love. It was always an economic issue. And so this father had 3 daughters, and this is how poor they were. He was ready to sell his own children into prostitution. I can't even imagine that. What that would be like, where that was the better idea. And I'm sure none of you can either. But that's how bad it was. And so St. Nicholas secretly went and took the gold coins and hid them in the girls' shoes or stockings or whatever that they had, so that they would have a dowry. He became their father that they really needed in that moment, and saved their lives. And so now we've put up those stockings by the fireplace, and we hope for some goodies. What a dark story that has actually behind it, right? It's an incredible story. And when he was found out, he told the father not to tell anyone, but just like the Lord when he would tell people not to tell anyone, of course the story eventually got out and people found out that he had done this. And it's become a Christian tradition ever since, right? The giving of gifts at Christmas. This has much to do with the image of St. Nicholas. But as a Christian exemplar and leader, he showed us the immense importance of this type of giving and caregiving for the most vulnerable among us. It wasn't just about giving some nice things to some people who were already comfortable and well off. It was really about saving the lives of people who were in grave danger. So I hope this Nativity Fast, you take seriously the call to all Orthodox Christians to make the Nativity Fast a time of serious almsgiving. This is an important time to help people who are really suffering. And right now, maybe for the first time in a long time in this country, a lot of people are in really severe crisis. The pandemic has put them in a position where they can't do what they would like to do for their living. We've been so blessed here at St. Mary's, we can still function. There are other states where the restrictions are much stricter, much more unreasonable, frankly, and some of those churches are failing. That's terrible, but there are many people whose own businesses are failing. Many of us were blessed that we worked for major institutions like the government or other major public institutions, and we have a level of security that's unparalleled through the rest of this country. I grew up in Detroit, and I've seen what happens when the institutions that supported you disappear. The auto industry kind of doesn't quite disappear, but let's put it this way, it wasn't the same. It seems in this country, when things get worse, the government just gets bigger. So you guys are in good shape, one way or the other. The rest of the country, it's very serious. People are suffering. They put their heart and their soul, their lifeblood into these businesses that they try to start, and then something comes along like this, and it's like a flood that comes and washes it all away. We have to be really thinking about our fellow Americans this year, and not just them, but the rest of the world. So please take seriously those appeals that come to you this year. Thirdly, St. Nicholas, following this, yes, stood up for those who had no voice. He spoke truth to power. That's the third thing that I want to talk about, is being fearless in a Christian way. He spoke truth to power, even to the emperor, even to high-level officials, to defend those who were in danger. There are a couple different stories about that. He spoke truth to power itself, to the very storms of the sea, and stilled the seas to save those on the ship that he was with. But here's the thing. St. Nicholas didn't do this out of a need to prove how manly he was. He didn't do this to show that he was brave and courageous and that his faith was still strong. He did it because somebody had to do it, and he was the one who was there to do it. And God moved through him and made it so. And he didn't do it so that he could put other people at risk as a result, because you know, when you speak truth to power in this world, you not only can get into trouble, but you can get the people you're trying to protect into even worse trouble. That's why people are so scared to do it, right? Like, maybe I'm willing to suffer, but man, what could it do to the people around me that I love? Or the people I'm trying to protect might even be worse off. So St. Nicholas was not reckless while he was being brave. He was brave. But he wasn't doing it out of some stupid machismo. I'm very sorry to say that a very well-respected priest in this country the other day published a public letter to a bishop, or to the chancellor of his diocese, saying that his bishop, if he wants his advice, should go and fearlessly embrace the faithful in church without the disgrace of the mask, and show no fear. And a lot of people were happy. They were like, yeah, that's what a bishop should be, fearless. That's not fearless, brothers and sisters. That's stupidly reckless and macho. That's all that is. And if you're really not afraid of what men people think, then you're not going to listen to that letter. You look at what's wise. We heard in the epistles two different things. Obey your preceptors that rule over you, so that they may do so with joy and not with grief. We also read elsewhere in the New Testament that we are called to obey our civil authorities and not to cause grief. We'll talk about this in our women's Bible study in 1 Peter chapter 2 this Tuesday. There's nothing bold or wise about being reckless with other people's lives for the sake of making some kind of point. And that priest should be ashamed of himself. I'm not going to name him, but you can easily find out who he is if you want. Because a lot of people take what he says seriously. If the mask is a disgrace, brothers and sisters, consider me disgraced. I will be very happy to wear this disgrace for as long as I am given that obedience, and as long as it is deemed wise. And if in the end it's determined that it was folly, I will happily embrace the disgrace that I suffered for your sake. I could care less if I look on men, okay? And if this priest wants to see who's the man, I'm happy to meet him behind the schoolyard. Right? You know how I am. It's so stupid. It's what it is. The other epistle said, walk circumspectly, not as fools. St. Paul had to say that because people do that. Christians act a fool all the time. They're susceptible to it because piety is easily corrupted by the devil. Piety is easily turned into some false type of humility, which is really just a kind of self-righteous parody of humility, and it's really just pride. We're in a difficult situation, brothers and sisters. Do the math. Take your emotions, take the politics out of it. Just do the math, look at the numbers. You'll see what I'm talking about. The reason the problems are increasing in this country with the disease is because people are not wearing the masks, they're not doing the social distancing. It could have been solved a long time ago. There are countries in the world right now whose rates are ridiculously low. It's not ridiculous, it's just we're ridiculously high and we think that's normal. We think that's okay. But it's just because we're stupid and we're stubborn and we're foolish. And I'm tired of it, man. I'm tired of seeing people who are intelligent people buy into dumb conspiracy theories, buy into dumb political positions. Do the math. Use your brain. Look and see. Do you think St. Nicholas would have walked around spreading the plague out of some pious desire to prove his faith? Okay? We're not snake handlers. Right? We don't do that in the Orthodox Church. We don't drink strychnine to prove that the Bible's to be taken so literally that way, like they do in Appalachia. Okay? If you want to go there, go there. God bless them. Let's be civilized. Let's be smart. Anyway, that's my rant for the weekend. Sorry, I didn't mean to go that harsh. But brothers and sisters, St. Nicholas, slapped the face of Arius. I wasn't going to mention it because I always feel like I feel bad for mentioning the fact. But St. Nicholas spoke truth to power, and when he was faced with a dumb guy who was destroying the church from within, and he said, St. Nicholas, do you know who I am? He said, I know you. You're the first spawn of Satan. And he smacked him across the face. That's also speaking truth to power. Being a Christian doesn't always mean you're nice. You have to love people, even when they're being foolish. And sometimes you have to set them straight. So brothers and sisters, may St. Nicholas help us, help our leaders do the right thing. Do smart things. And guide us so that we can be obedient. Americans don't like this virtue. They like all the other things in the gospel except that part about obedience. I don't want to obey anybody. I want to obey my thirst. I want to obey, I want to obey my own will. That's my religion. For so many people. And for ourselves, if we're honest, most of the time. We are called to obey a higher standard, a higher rule of faith, the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let it guide us into humility and abstinence. This is a form of abstinence. It is. And yes, it's a virtue. And if I'm virtue signaling, good. It's my job. The priest isn't going to show you what virtue looks like. Who is? God forgive me. God help us all. Christ is among us.
Sie hätten euch schaffen.